all of the young adults are now serving in the leadership positions of the stake. And it's transitory. We may call a counselor, and all of a sudden 3 months later he has some responsibilities he's got to take off for him. We have to call another counselor to serve in the bishopric. We ordain them high priests. Our Stake Relief Society presidency is made up of all young single adult sisters. They are so good.
Yeah.
We expect a lot out of them as young adults in their lives. When we send them off to go to college and prepare for work, some of them are full-blown professionals. But when they come to church, for a period of time that we didn't expect the same thing out of them.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for the change because they were so grateful and ready to take on these opportunities and to be able to lead and to have the same experiences I had when I was 24 years old to be in a bishopric, to take that away from these 24, 25-year-olds, 21-year-olds that return them off their missions, I just think was a miss. And I'm grateful that they're doing it now. And if you want to see how it looks, just come to our stake.
Yeah.
They're doing an unbelievable job leading in every aspect in our stake.
I had the opportunity to be on board of the BYU Cruise in April of 2025, and it was remarkable. A full chartered ship of 3,500 BYU fans. I was one of them, and so much going on. I mean, this is a phenomenal experience that we'll definitely talk about when they do it again in 2 years. You don't want to miss this. We had the opportunity while on board to do a few Leading Saints type events. We did some workshop presentation, and we also did 2 live recordings, one of which you're about to see, recorded with Jennifer Rockwood and Brandon Doman. Now, if you're not familiar with Brandon Doman, he is a former BYU quarterback and coach. He was actually Lavell Edwards' last BYU quarterback before Lavell Edwards retired, and if you know the story, you know the story. It is awesome. So, a legend, and I just love talking to athletes and coaches who have performed on these high levels because there are so many leadership principles embedded in these stories. I talked with Brandon Doman about his high school coach at Skyline High in Salt Lake City. This is, if you're not familiar with the Salt Lake City area, Skyline High has been one of the elite football teams in the Salt Lake Valley for years and years. And so to understand how he engaged with his coach in high school and how that led him into being a Division I athlete and even being drafted into the NFL. Now, Brandon's also currently serving as a YSA Stake president. So I'm always looking for these bridges from athletic coaching to church coaching or church leadership, right? What are the principles and approaches that he takes as a stake president that worked as an athlete, worked as a coach, and now he implements there? And just his beautiful approach of just serving, loving, being the stake president that YSA need. Definitely an episode that you're going to love. So let's jump into it. Here's my interview with President Brandon Doman. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me to participate. Yeah.
Now, maybe let's just start with your own personal faith development. Like we kind of know a lot of your family, right? You're a BYU family. I remember being that young little kid, seeing your brother. I think he was probably my first favorite player, the wide receiver, Bryce Doman, that was running routes out there. And so what was it? How would you describe your faith development in the Doman home?
Well, I'm the youngest of 4 brothers. There's 7 kids, so I have 3 sisters and 3 brothers. And I was the beneficiary of having some unbelievable older siblings, particularly these 3 older brothers of mine, and they led the way in an unbelievable way for me. They were faithful. They were never perfect, but unbelievable examples to me of how to be ferocious in your desires to accomplish the goals that you have in front of you, but also very obedient to wanting to live the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that was extremely important to them. And so as the youngest brother, I wanted to be like them. I really had a desire to be like them and to be with them, and since they believed that way, I wanted to believe that way and had a desire to do that. So I've always said that everybody should have big brothers like I've had, and I know everybody doesn't, but I was the fortunate young brother of our family.
And I'm the youngest brother in my family as well, and just seeing, I would imagine seeing the example, the missions happen, the how they show up in their priesthood and those things. I'm sure that dynamic existed. Right?
Yes, absolutely. From a young age, we were taught that if your mind can conceive it and your heart can believe it, you can achieve it. And so we set goals. My dad on a yearly basis would educate us on the process of setting goals and how to accomplish goals. My oldest brother, Kevin, was very much goal-oriented, and so he would take it very seriously, and that trickled down to all of us. And so we learned that if we could get our heart to actually believe what our mind wanted, we could accomplish the goals that we had in front of us. And that was the hardest thing, was to actually convince your heart that it was going to do what your mind wants it to do. And I've experienced that all the way through my life, even to this day. How do we truly take it from our mind through our heart? Because my experience has been that once our heart truly believes it, we're going to accomplish it.
Yeah. So did you feel like there was an obvious culture that your parents established in your home? I mean, what comes to mind is, how do they do that?
Yeah. Well, I didn't come from an affluent background. My dad had gone through some unique challenges financially. When I was about 10 to 12 years old, again, being one of the younger children in our family, I didn't experience maybe some of the more affluent experiences that maybe some of my older siblings did. But at that time, we basically lost everything. And from the time I was 12 to 18, my dad was reinventing himself professionally. And we moved like 6 times between 12 and 18 so that my parents could keep us in the Skyline High School boundaries in Salt Lake City because of a coach by the name of Roger Dupe, and not having, a real financial strength. And the ticket to college for us at that point for these 4 boys was a scholarship to play football. Yeah. And so we stayed there at Skyline in hopes to have that football experience. And all 4 of us got scholarships to play football at BYU, but it was a gritty growing up experience, and there's a lot there and a lot that went into that, but we learned how to work, and we learned that nothing was free, and that if we were going to accomplish something, we were going to have to go get it and make it happen.
And that literally became your life, as we learned, just in your journey to becoming the quarterback at BYU. It wasn't just given to you because you were Doman, right? Yeah, you had to earn it. For sure. So was sports always, it was just a given? You're naturally athletic family, but also, it was just something you did, right?
Yeah, from the time I was born, I'm sure there was a ball in my hand and teaching us how to dribble. My dad loved basketball, so we always had a basketball court on the side of the house. And when we had free time, we would go out and shoot and play basketball. And then we'd go out and throw and play catch. There was always a baseball mitt, baseball, football, basketball somewhere. We played every sport you could play. I wish we still did that. Dang it! I wish the kids were still playing every single sport you could possibly play, because it made us a well-rounded athlete in every way. But sports was an important thing. It wasn't everything, but it was very, very important. My dad's almost 88. He loves sports still to this day. He doesn't miss very many games, and it's important to him. He loves the competition and the gritty aspect of that, and it was a great environment to be raised in because it really did teach us this group, how to be a gritty person, and athletics provided that for us, and then the hard work we had to do.
What have you learned, or what could you teach as far as little league or sports for that developing ages today? Because it is so different with the camps and the the travel and the expense at times. Sometimes it can scare some parents off,
I think that you have to start with the end in mind. And oftentimes I've experienced now, this is our 4th son is now an 8th grader. And so we've been through this experience, and do they love it? And why are you doing this? And oftentimes I feel like if we're living the experience through our children, it oftentimes creates a barrier between us and our kids. And my dad always taught us that as a parent, we need to stay on the same side of the fence as our children. And if the parent is living through the children, oftentimes it puts us on the opposite side of the fence. Now we're peering through the fence at our child, and it becomes all about me. And there's been a lot of times I've made some significant mistakes where inadvertently it was about me, not my kid. And sometimes sports becomes all about mom and dad, or whatever it is, dance or cheer or music or whatever it is. And it was never about my dad. Never. My mom was the loudest cheerleader in the stands, and it was about us 100%. And it built confidence. It developed this self-awareness of how loved I was. And they never missed anything. And it wasn't because they were expecting me to accomplish some certain feat. It was they loved me and they were with me 100%. And I cherish those memories and those experiences of knowing how much my mom and dad loved me. And a lot of it was manifest through them just being present in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine, you've coached at the D1 level, so, getting the car on the ride home from Little League, sometimes you kick into that D1 coach a little bit and can't help it, right?
I'll never forget I don't remember how old I was. My dad was very loving, but he also told the truth. And I often say to my kids, do you want me to tell you the truth? Or do you want me to just tell you what you want to hear?
Yeah.
And they say, tell me the truth. And I think that my children, even though at times it's been hard, they know that Dad's going to tell them the truth. And I think they've learned to appreciate that. And my dad would tell me the truth. So we got in the car. We're driving home after a basketball game. And he asked me, how'd the basketball game go? And I said, well, not so good. And I know I'm about ready to get it. And I'm thinking, I don't want to have this conversation. He said, after a couple more questions, he said, there was a moment in the game when I watched you play defense, and you were playing so hard. You were trying so hard. You would not let this guy get past you. It was so fun. It was so impressive to watch you, Brandon. And then you stole the basketball from him, and you took off down the court all by yourself. You left him in the dust, and you went down, you dribbled all the way down, and you went up for the layup, and you missed the layup. Don't miss the layup. After all the work and all the effort that you went through to get to that moment, finish.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know what it was about that moment, but the way he said it to me and the way that it was ingrained in my mind, the word finish is important to me. And I find myself yelling it to my kids all the time. Finish. No matter what the score is, no matter what you're doing, finish. And my dad taught me that it doesn't matter if the day's long and really challenging, no matter what it is that you're doing, finish. And so from that point on, I'm not so certain I missed a fast break layup ever again.
Yeah.
And it was a big part of my career. It's a short-lived career at BYU, but that was just the way I was raised, that we're going to finish no matter what. And that had some impacts on me as a football player at BYU with a couple of the finishes that we had as a team. And that was just a very important part of the way I was raised.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. So your parents worked hard to keep you in Skyline boundaries. Tell me about Roger Dupe as far as, what was it about him that made him a strong coach and leader?
Roger Dupe played football at BYU, was the first all-WAC center, I think, or offensive lineman. He might not have been a center for BYU.
Oh, wow.
And years later, he became a high school football coach, the all-time winningest football coach in the history of the state of Utah. I don't know that anybody will ever catch him. And for a long period of time, he was a high school coach at Skyline High School. When he came, I think he had 10 children, and was serving as the bishop of his ward at some point in time there when he was coaching us. This was a busy man, but an unbelievable guy.
Yeah.
He showed up to Skyline and says, we have three rules. We don't drink alcohol and smoke, and we don't do any of that kind of stuff during the, he says, if I catch you doing it, you're not going to be able to play. Now, did some of the players get away with it? Probably.
Yeah.
But if he knew about it, you didn't get to play. We don't swear. And this was entrenched from coaches down, and he held us to it. Now, did boys swear? Yes.
Yeah.
But not around him. And they said, number 3, when you walk onto the grass of this field, I don't care if it's during third period or it's 7 o'clock in the morning and you're walking across it on your way to the school with your backpack on. When you hit this grass field, you jog. And when you jog, you yell the words, go, go, go. Those are the 3 rules. And we're like, this guy's crazy. We don't want to play for this guy. How does this translate over to football? Well, I'll never forget years later watching randomly these high school football players park their cars and start across this grass field. We never walked on that grass field. And he was teaching us work ethic, but he was teaching us consistency and teaching us the importance of, if we can do small things, we can do great things. And if we couldn't do the go on the grass, there was no way we were ever going to be able to transfer this into us being able to be a good football team. So during practice, we would run we called it the go. We'd run a go around the tree and back. And we had to say go in unison as loud as we could. And if we couldn't do that, we didn't get to the next part of practice. And that's the way he coached us. Just, we were so detailed in technique, we were so detailed in scheme, we were so detailed in the way that we went about preparing for games. And it was such a perfect transition into college because I was ready. I was coached by a college-ready environment, by a football coach that was such a good man. That transition from Skyline High School to BYU was such a seamless, clean transition because of the environment we had been coached in. I was so grateful for it. And it was just a good, clean, it was an unbelievable environment to be part of.
I just love that concept of that unison of, like, because unifying a team is so crucial, and it's very difficult to do. But if there's something, it's almost like the make your bed mentality of, like, just start with something that's seems almost impractical, unnecessary, but it really feeds into the culture of, like, if we can do that in unison, maybe we can do some things on the field in unison. Right? He
would say, "Hey, Mrs. Snyder across the street, she's called me on the phone, and she's telling me that our go-go's are no good." And it's like 6 a.m. in the morning, and he would use that. She'd say, "Sister Snyder right over here, she's not happy with the go-go's we got going on right now. We're going to have to do that again." But it became tradition. Yeah. We shaved our heads, which the players did, but it was, how do we create, and the theme for our year that we won the state championship was one heartbeat. But he fostered that. I want you to be completely yoked to each other, become a family of brothers. And you can see that with these BYU football players. Lavell did such an unusual job doing that there's not very many places in the nation, and I've experienced it, that have this kind of brotherhood and this type of desire to be associated to. I mean, for Jim to come back and participate the way that he's participating, and Gifford, Nielsen, and all of these guys that have an association to this program, has everything to do with the coaches and the environment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anything, I'm sure, and I want to talk about Lavell a little bit, but as you got into coaching, I'm sure there was a lot of Lavell in your coaching. Was there much from your high school coach? I mean, what principles from your high school coach that came out in your own personal coaching?
Yeah, so our high school coach, like I said, was a master of technique, was a master of a scheme, and he didn't waver from the scheme. So I was in an earlier meeting where Gifford Nielsen said the defense is always wrong, and Roger was an offensive-minded guy. Again, we ran the triple option wishbone. Yeah, we ran the same 4 plays the entire game. But the defense was always wrong no matter what was going on, and they were. So I learned how to make a read at a young age. It filtered all the way down through the Little League. And if I was going to do a handoff to the fullback, I didn't give it to the fullback unless the defensive end stepped up the field. And if the defensive end stepped up the field, I gave it to the fullback, and then I would fake like I was pitching it. If the defensive end stepped down and tackled the fullback, I would keep the ball. And then I would go to my next read, and I'd run past the defensive end who just tackled the fullback, and now I was in front of either an outside linebacker or a strong safety. And that person had to decide whether to tackle me or go after the person I was going to pitch it to. And if he came and tackled me, then I would pitch it to that person. He'd run down the sideline. And that scared BYU to death. That's the environment I grew up in, until we beat the University of Utah in Lavell's last game in the stadium with an option pitch to Luke Staley down the sideline. But that was something I knew from the time I was 10 years old, and I had learned to just read and adapt to the situation. And if we run it and execute what we're doing better than the defense, chances are we're going to win. So it was blocking and tackling and running plays, and it's totally applicable to life. Yeah. I mean, all of the small things that we are asked to do and are reminded to do on a daily basis as members of the church, oftentimes we just neglect and we don't do. And I've come to find in my life that there is power in that. When the prophet says that we can be seeking for and expecting miracles, if we'll do the things that we are constantly being reminded to do, that it's not just a reminder to do these small things, they actually create power in our lives. And for me in my life, it's changed everything.
Yeah.
And in the consistency of maintaining that type of a worshiping schedule in my life of things that I know that I need to do, and then to actually experience the power that comes from that, helps me be a better person.
Yeah, it's powerful. Obviously, I never got a chance to interview Lavell before he passed. I'm sure in the eternities in my podcast I'll get that chance. But as a former player, like when you think of a leadership principle that he taught you, like what comes to mind?
The very first game that I started for him, we were at the University of Utah in Salt Lake, and we called the very first play of the game, which was going to be a quick little 5-yard hitch route out to a guy named Margin Hooks. Mm-hmm. And I took the snap, and I threw it to Margin. I didn't really see the defender. I didn't do a very good job of recognizing what was going on. The defender picked the ball off and ran it back for a touchdown.
Oh.
That was my first throw.
Oh my goodness!
So no one even remembers that.
Yeah.
It was 6-0. The game had started 7-0 because I threw an interception. He picked it off and ran it for a touchdown. And I'm jogging off the field. And you can imagine Lavell, he had his arms folded. He had the same look on his face. He didn't change the look. He didn't yell at me. He didn't get mad at me. He just, as I just walked by, it was, go get a drink. You got to get right back out there. But he didn't say any of that. He just kind of looked at me as I ran by like he did to everybody and didn't change his composure. The consistency in his leadership was unwavering from practice to game to over the years. And it's been extremely important to me throughout my life as I coached and as most importantly as I parent my own children or serve in any capacity, is maintaining the consistency of this is what we do, this is how we do it, and I'm going to lead you the same way I've always led you. And you knew he was with you. And he was unwavering in the support of his quarterbacks. If he chose a guy, he was unwavering in that support, and he didn't change. So I came off, I got a drink, and I went right back out there. Mm-hmm. And that has had an impact.
Cool.
I've shared that story a number of times because I think there's times when you want to just go, are you kidding me? That's going to be your first decision, your first throw? Can we get the next guy ready?
Right.
But partly he didn't have anybody, and he couldn't do that. He knew better to do that. So I think that's probably one of the things that I'll
that's awesome.
remember forever.
Just the image of Lavell, no headset. I mean, he was famous for the no headset coach, and I mean, today I don't think any coach on any league could ever fathom going out to the field without a headset on. And to me, it's such an image of delegation and trust and that consistency of like in our own leadership journeys. Like, do you trust those around you enough not to wear a headset on game day? Like, wow, like that's a lot, But it's and just that confidence he had and being able to do that, and it worked. It's amazing.
Well, his assistant coaches were able to coach.
Yeah.
I mean, if they didn't get it done, it wasn't going to get done.
Yeah.
And oftentimes head coaches are micromanaging everybody's job. Mm-hmm. And there are some that do it to this day that are very successful, but they are in the details of everything. And their assistant coaches on those staffs are miserable people. Mm-hmm. They don't like it. I mean, they don't thrive in that environment. They're not successful in that environment, and they can't wait to get out of it. And Lavell created an environment of enabling and guiding his coaches, and then truly expecting that they were going to be successful and giving them every opportunity to be the very best they could be. And I think that's a pretty rare environment, honestly.
Absolutely.
In corporate America and coaching. I think it's hard for church leaders to just step away, and it's hard for youth leaders to let the young men and young women do it. We always get right in the middle of it and micromanage it, and it doesn't enable leadership.
Yeah. Now, your formal church leadership journey, doesn't it begin in college? Weren't you in a bishopric?
Yeah.
As you were quarterback?
When I was the quarterback at BYU, my entire senior year, I was a counselor in our married student ward bishopric.
So what's the story about being called to that? I mean, because I doubt like Kalani's bishop's thinking, maybe I should put him in the bishopric, right?
Yeah.
Like he's got plenty to do, right? So what's the story there?
All at that time, married student wards, you would have a young adult serve as a counselor in the bishopric. So if it wasn't me, it was going to be somebody else.
Right.
They weren't bringing out of unit, married couples to come in and do that. So someone in our ward was going to be a counselor in the bishopric, and our bishop called me in one day and said, "Hey, I feel like I'm supposed to call you to be a counselor in the bishopric." And it set the stage throughout my wife and our life that it's just more important.
Yeah.
And we are just grateful for anything that we're asked to do, and we say yes to accepting callings, and we do the best we can. And I'll remember landing at 4 or 5 in the morning coming from an East Coast game and having to go home and shower and throw on a suit and go to bishopric meeting next morning. I'm quarterback at BYU, and all my buddies are going home to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I didn't get done till 3 o'clock that afternoon with tithing, but I know that we were blessed. My wife and I were blessed because of it, and I would have never changed it in a million years. It was such a remarkable blessing and opportunity in our lives to get to do that.
Yeah. Any leadership principles come to mind that you learned during that time that, a different venue than the football field, but maybe in more formal meetings and conducting and things? What did you take away from that?
Yeah, because as a missionary, you get to participate in missionary work and see the organization of missionary work. In a bishopric, you get to extend callings and give temple recommend interviews and see some of the true rawness of membership of the church. And here I was 24 years old, and interacting with my peers in that setting endeared me to them in a different way. But hadn't at that young of an age, extending those types of callings and working through and counseling and participating with members in those ways, I think enabled opportunities to grow spiritually and recognize that football is really not that important. It's an awesome sport, and it's really great, but it's not that great.
Yeah.
And it strengthened my testimony of the gospel, and it enabled me to know what was first in my life. And that reminder was needed. And I don't think it was a mistake. I think Heavenly Father certainly provided for me personally an opportunity to continue to remind me football just isn't going to be first place in your life. And hopefully we've been able to do that as a family and keep things in perspective.
Yeah. And that's what I really appreciate about our faith tradition with lay leadership, and like church leadership is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter how many snaps you've taken on a football field or those things. Like, it really is so unique in its own way that suddenly it's very humbling, and you maybe feel like that rookie again, What's the story? You currently serve as a stake president. Is there a story behind you being called as stake president?
I don't know if there's anything special. We have a building right by our home that serves as the stake center for the Alpine Utah Young Single Adult Stake, which runs from Alpine all the way to Linden. So Alpine, Highlands, Cedar Hills, Pleasant Grove, and Linden. About 2,700 young single adults that live or have records in that stake. And I had been serving as a counselor in our stake presidency for a little while, and that stake presidency changed, and I was brought in as a candidate, I guess, I don't know, candidate, but one of the interviewees that was being interviewed for that calling, and they extended the call about 4 years ago. And I think it's probably been one of the greatest gifts that we've been given as a family. It's been really remarkable. I keep saying that word, but it really has been a game changer in our lives to get to be with young single adults all day, every day.
Yeah.
We have 3 children that are young single adults now, and they're so unusual and so great in so many ways. It has been such a blessing to get to see that firsthand and participate in the work with them. Every time I release a couple that was called from out of unit to serve with young adults, and they're in their stake working, then we release them back to their home wards. They're so mad.
I know. I bet.
They hate me for it because they have to
Yeah.
go back to the family ward. But it's really that special of an experience.
Yeah. Is it technically, it's not a BYU stake?
No, that's right. It surrounds our home ward. We live
Okay.
in Pleasant Grove, and it's the geographic area in which we live.
Yeah. Anything else unique about just that stake or the type of why? I guess are they? I'm sure a lot of students, but they're not necessarily BYU student, right? Maybe a lot of UVU or.
We have 18 to 35-year-olds. Used to be 18 to 31-year-olds, and then last year they changed it to 18 to 35. And so we've got two different age groups. You have 18 to 25-year-old wards and 26 to 35-year-old wards. And when we were called 4 years ago, we were given the charge to begin calling young single adults to serve in all callings, except for bishop and stake president. We had over 100 married out-of-unit couples that were serving in basically every leadership calling except for Elders Quorum and Relief Society president.
Yeah.
The entire High Council, the Stake Relief Society presidency were made up of the wives of the stake presidency, and then they had activities committee chairmen and so on and so forth that were all, leading out in the leadership aspect of the stake. Since that time, we've released them, all of them, and all of the young adults are now serving in the leadership positions of the stake. And it's transitory. We may call a counselor, and all of a sudden, 3 months later, he has some responsibilities he's got to take off for him. We have to call another counselor to serve in the bishopric. We ordain them high priests. Our Stake Relief Society presidency is made up of all young single adult sisters. They are so good.
Yeah.
We expect a lot out of them as young adults in their lives. When we send them off to go to college and prepare for work, some of them are full-blown professionals. But when they come to church, for a period of time that we didn't expect the same thing out of them.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for the change because they were so grateful and ready to take on these opportunities and to be able to lead and to have the same experiences I had when I was 24 years old to be in a bishopric, to take that away from these 24, 25-year-olds, 21-year-olds that return them off their missions, I just think was a miss. And I'm grateful that they're doing it now. And if you want to see how it looks, just come to our stake. 'Cause they're doing an unbelievable job leading in every aspect in our stake.
So when you have stake council meeting, it's a bunch of YSAs looking at you, right?
The whole room is full
Yeah.
of young adults. All 12 of our high counselors are young single adults, and all of our specialists and all of our, like I said, Stake Relief Society presidency, our executive secretaries and clerks, and it's been so fun to witness their faith and their willingness to take this challenge on, and they want it, and they were excited to have the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, anything you notice as far as like their style of leadership, how they're approaching those roles, whether maybe where they struggle, where they excel? What comes to mind as you monitor that?
We live in a world now that has taken away, I think, the beauty of sociality, person to person, peer to peer, social awareness and social opportunities to now being in front of a cell phone and a screen, and so they have a lot of apprehension. They have a lot of fears. They deal with emotional resiliency challenges. Their self-reliance emotionally and mentally at times is weak, and they don't like it. They're really anxious to gather. They're anxious to be together, but we've created a world where it makes it really tough on them. And so we find ourselves not only trying to help them spiritually become self-reliant, but also mentally and emotionally become self-reliant. The temptations of the world to cause them to be isolated and in a really hard and dark way is very easy to gain access to. And so we fight against those temptations as a stake and enabling them to gain access to being liberated from that. And so we gather. The church has gotten better and better at creating YSA gathering places, and we try and gather as much as we can. And we're not the Northern Utah County YSA activities chairman of the area, and they don't want that out of me.
Yeah. It's easy to fall into that, though, right?
They don't want me to just go plan parties all day long.
Yeah.
And I ask them, do you guys want me to be the party planner? Is that what you want? They're like, no, we want to gather, but they do want to gather to the Savior. And they want to be gathered to nurture, to the nurturing word of God. They want to come to church. They don't want us to be pounding them with, you got to get married. Let's have, come get a cookie and take a lookie, right? I mean, they don't want that. They're going to take care of that on their own. But they want to come and feel the Spirit.
Yeah.
Right? The weak beats the tar out of them. And they want to show up on Sunday and just be nourished by the good word. They want to feel safe. They want to feel welcomed. And they want to be able to trust that when they come, that they're in an environment where there's safety in the harbor, and they can gain access to the blessings of the harbor and the blessings of being associated to all of it while they're healing. And most of them, I should say all of them, are healing in some form or fashion. And I think our responsibility as stake presidency is to enable the healing to take place through Christ and then prepare them to make and then keep covenants in the temple. And as we enable that process for them so that when they eventually make their own covenants, that they can be standing on a different foundation, on a different platform to have success. And it has really been an unbelievable experience to witness the courage and the faith of these young adults as they make those decisions and then leave our stake ready for the next step of their life.
Yeah. Is there anything specific you witnessed with that age change, that bump up to 35, and now we sort of have those two segments? Anything noteworthy?
Yeah, they were waiting for it. We had instantly about a 15%, 20% increase in young adults that started coming to the stake. You have 18-year-old young men and young women that are graduating from high school, preparing for missions, and they're leaving their home wards after all of these years, and they show up to a YSA ward, and let's say I'm an 18-year-old young lady, and there's this 31-year-old
yeah.
dude, right?
Yeah.
There's a 31-year-old guy standing there, and that's a little bit intimidating and a little bit uncomfortable. And so this has enabled the separation of these two social groups, and to be in like age has been remarkable for them, and they're so grateful for it. So we now have 18 to 25-year-old wards, and we've seen a huge volume of increase in attendance to that ward, and same thing with the 26 to 35-year-olds, and the way that they socialize and the way that just the comfort level of being together in like ages has been a really good thing.
Yeah. So obviously they call bishops, the YSA bishops from the surrounding area. Is there anything that you do specifically to orient that bishop? Because again, you don't want them to think that they're the party planning committee for their ward or anything. But how do you orient a new bishop in the wards there?
Yeah. So one of the unique things about our stake is that we are the geographic boundary of the family feeder stakes. So we have 24 family stakes that are all within the geographic boundary of our stake. A student stake's different. They have a much smaller geography. They have apartment complexes and a large volume of students in one area. We have 4 cities, right?
Yeah.
And so we may have a ward that has the geographic boundary of 3 stakes. So I'll reach out to those 3 stake presidents and say, hey, we need a bishop. And we're not sending him to Provo. He's going to get to live right there and participate with the YSAs in your stake. And so each stake president will generally prayerfully consider 2 or 3 brothers and their wives that we could meet with. And so we try to coordinate priesthood keys and combine the effort together so that they're receiving inspiration and then we're receiving inspiration. So it's been a really cool experience to witness the stake presidents make recommendations. In many instances, the brothers they're recommending to be the bishop are going to be the bishop of their own children that are young adults.
Yeah.
And so they're recommending these brothers in, and then to receive inspiration as to who those bishops are has been a really sacred experience as a stake president. And then extend the callings and then train them to do exactly what I said, and these bishops are going to be this husband and wife are the only married couple in that ward. I think it's the first time in a young single adult ward where that bishop and wife now feels and somewhat looks like a mission leader.
Yeah.
And his wife. They're going to see the transition of hundreds of YSAs that will come through their ward, and they're not going to have, a mission president will have counselors, but in this particular case, they are the example of a married couple. And so we ask them to be that example and to be present and to share and to bear witness of what they've come to know. They invite the young adults to their homes, and they try and engage as much as they can with them, but to not micromanage these young adults, to train and to teach. We talk about guiding, right? Guiding and enabling. It's the old EDGE leadership. Educate, demonstrate, guide, and enable these young adults to be in a position to go off into the world and lead. And they're doing a great job. Our YSA bishops, I can only speak for our stake, are so good. And their husbands and wives are so good at what they do. And it's probably been one of the other things that my wife and I would attest to is witnessing their call and then watching them serve has been a really, really cool thing.
Yeah. And then they're mad at you when they have to leave.
Yeah,
right?
and then we release them after 3 years. They're worn out.
Yeah, I bet.
Kind of like a mission president, right?
Yeah.
They're exhausted, but they don't want to leave.
Yeah. Tell me about, because I'm sure your role feels, with your wife as well, it's sort of a couple, you're both involved in the stake to some degree. How does that dynamic work? And I assume your counselors are both older married?
Yes.
So what does that look like?
Yeah, so I have 2 counselors, both of whom are out-of-unit married brothers. And we've stayed that way generally because we have so many young adults that are getting married. And as I've considered, calling a young single adult counselor, I have several times. I don't find myself being able to interview these couples coming for sealing interviews. And I've just felt that these young adults, as they come in for a sealing interview, benefit greatly from being interviewed by a brother that's currently sealed and has had that experience. And so in some stakes, the stake president may have enough time to do all of those interviews. And in that case, I think it would be wonderful to have a YSA counselor. I just can't get to all of them. There's so many of them. And so we find ourselves doing temple argument interviews all the time of living ordinance, first-time interviews for endowments and sealings most of the time. That's what we're doing. And if we're not doing that, we're training. We have 11 YSA wards, so we are training elders' quorums and relief societies and high counselors and bishopric counselors. And it's a pretty busy calling, but my wife, I keep looking over there, but my wife does an unbelievable job of speaking because they want to hear from her as much as they can. And so as often as I can, we'll just put her in front of them and let her speak and bear testimony to things that she feels. And that's been a powerful thing for me to have her a part of that, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah. Any specific leadership principles, like if you were to go back to day one, President Brandon Doman, what do you say, hey, don't forget this? Or what leadership principles you picked up on year 4?
Great question. I think that there's never going to be front loading. Sometimes you feel like if we can just get all this in place and get organized and front load this effort.
Just get ahead of it, right?
It's constant and enjoy it. And don't make it more than it is. And don't allow yourselves to get caught up in the hobby keys of things that just aren't important. So let me give you an example. I said, am I the activities chairman of the Utah YSAs of Northern Utah County? It'd be very easy as a stake president to just be all consumed with that effort. And your stake presidency meetings and your council meetings, everything you go into is, how are the activities going? And all of a sudden, the things of most importance start struggling. And so we've had to constantly remind ourselves, what's most important? We may get 12% of the stake might show up to an activity. But on Sunday, we might get 60%. So how is our Sabbath day worship? What does Sunday look like? What does sacrament meeting look like? What do our chapels feel like when they come? That has to be number one. And if activities become number one, then we just missed an opportunity with 40, 50% of the other YSAs that didn't experience the activity, and our Sabbath days weren't as good. And so I've often reminded them, if our activities aren't as good, but our Sabbath day is fantastic, then we're on track. And if we can get our activities to be wonderful, we'll keep working at that. But that's something that I think early on, there was such volume of stuff that was coming at us all the time that I would remind a new stake president or myself, don't get hung up on the lesser things. Maintain focus on the most important things, and the lesser things will get better and better over time. But ensure that the most important things are taken care of appropriately.
Yeah. And I love that because, I mean, you hope that the Sabbath experience is what we do best, right? And we have all the tools, all the resources to do that. But so making sure the focus maintains there is really powerful. Really, are there any any practical tools, apps, things you do in meetings that help you just kind of manage that load that's constantly coming at you?
One thing that I can say that I've been the beneficiary of is our church leadership does a fantastic job of training stake presidents. Every year we meet with a member of the Quorum of the 12, not individually, but as a group. They travel all over the world. Every stake president is in a meeting annually with a member of the 12. After every general conference, we meet with Area 70. We're trained by our Utah area presidency, then our Area 70 train us. And I'm not certain it was as good, that it used to be as good, but they've taken a very significant step forward in the amount of training and emphasis that they place on that, and then enabling tools through our LDS tools. And if you go in after general conference, there's leadership tools and videos and trainings of everything that they train in general conference that you have now access to, which we didn't. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we didn't have that. So you'd go to this meeting, you would take tedious notes, and you would never be able to transfer all the training that was given to you all the way down to your ward councils and so on and so forth, down into the presidencies. But because of the tools that are available to us, we're able to effectively train more. And it's really the stake president's job to now make sure that the stake is gaining access to the training and the information that needs to be given. And it can be daunting at times because there's so much coming. And that's where these two brothers that I serve with as counselors do an unbelievable job of taking up most of those items so that we can stay, stake president can stay focused on the things that he needs to stay focused on. And so the church is an unbelievable engine of tools and training tools to help us. And it's been a pretty cool experience to have that training.
That's cool. We could go around the room here and talk to individuals who have YSAs in their life, and there'd be a lot of heartbreak in a lot of these stories, a lot of worry, and just the time we live in. I mean, that demographic is under so much pressure. Anything else that you've learned, or any encouragement or hope that you could give as far as those individuals who worry about their YSA family members?
I would say this and this is both as a stake president and as a father. Heavenly Father has not predestined any of us. And Elder Christofferson reminded us of this. Heavenly Father has not predestined any of us to have anything less than the full inheritance. And oftentimes some of these young adults will sit with me, or even my own children, and not feel as though they're going to be the beneficiaries of the full inheritance of heaven, of heavenly parents in heaven, because of the different trials and challenges that they may be dealing with, from same-gender attraction to illness to all sorts of different challenges that they may be dealing with. That promise is rung true, and it's rung true in all conversations, that we are predestined to have a full inheritance. And that's been a really nice reminder for me. And because of that predestined inheritance, miracles never cease. And I've seen and participated with 35-year-old men and women that will be sitting in my office that have taken a very curious pathway. And they'll look back at it in many years and say, wow, that was quite a pathway that I took. And it was very curious. But the curious pathway that they took provided an abundance of blessings, and the outcome was unbelievably miraculous. And we have witnessed it as in our stake. My wife and I have witnessed it in our own home. And the prayers and the promises associated to what we've been, when you pray and are seeking for help underneath the context of promises that have been given, then we should believe in. We should believe that the answers and the miracles will come. And as a parent and as a stake president, they come. They don't always come in the timeline that we want, but I've seen that they come. And these young adults, as they sit in front of me, how they made their way back to sitting in front of me is nothing short of thousands of prayers, many miracles along the way, and in my opinion, ministering angels that are supporting and helping and aiding that process to be back where they need to be. And it might be after this life, but I think we should hope and pray that it's during this life. And I've witnessed so many of them, and it's increased my hope and faith in them. And so I believe that every one of them will gain a full inheritance.
Yeah, it's powerful. Well, I typically don't have a studio audience with me, but anybody in the room have a question that for Brandon before we wrap up? Oh.
Ask my wife. Do you have any questions? No. Should I ask her to say something? Oh, she makes it happen. No
What's the experience been like for you? Just the journey of leadership as a couple.
Oh, it's just been special. We just feel so blessed to be able to have these opportunities, and I like just associations with people that we have met along the way. Other counselors and their wives and the YSAs, they become dear friends and mentors, and I just feel like we gain more than we're able to give. We just are able to learn so much from all these YSAs and watching them become who they are and be willing to be vulnerable and also be leaders, and they're unbelievable leaders. And so it's been fun to see them step up to the plate and do what they do best and lead each other, and they can be more compassionate amongst each other as they lead each other. So
awesome. Yeah. Last question I have for you as you reflect on your leadership journey, both in sports and the church. How has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
I have two pictures. I have a slogan, and then I have a picture in my office, and I'll end with the picture. The slogan says grit, and grit is defined in my office as greatness requires individual toughness, and you have to get up, and leadership is hard. So you're going to get knocked down, and you're going to have hard things that are going to happen, and your knuckles are going to scrape along the ground, and you're going to get bangs and bruises along the way. And I've learned that you need to get up. And I learned as a player in sports that part of my responsibility as a leader was to get up faster than the opponent. And if you got the wind knocked out of you, get up anyways. And people will follow that kind of leadership. If there's truth in your purpose and willpower in your character, Vince Lombardi would say, then you can be a true leader. But if there's truth in your purpose and willpower in your character, that means it's hard. And did you get in the front of the line, or did you get in the back of the line? And I've learned as a leader that if you're going to lead, then lead. Mm-hmm. And if you're not going to lead, then let someone else lead. And so when I've been asked to lead, I've decided to lead, and at times I've failed. But it's enabled me to learn, how to do it better, and I'm grateful for that. Even getting let go from BYU, 13 years ago, was a catapult for me to get better in my life, and I'm grateful for that. I look back at those experiences, and it was just a significant blessing 13 years later. The second thing in my office is a picture of Captain Moroni and Helaman and the 2,000 Stripling Warriors. And it's a picture of the 2,000 Stripling Warriors after they had just been to war, and they're defeated and beat up and completely bruised and battered. But the slogan under the painting says, yes, it is true, sir. All are present and accounted for. And I think in leadership, we want everybody there. And we should do everything we can to find every last person we can. And I think that's one, if there's one mantra of the Alpine YSA Stake is we need to find everybody. We have to go out and gather and find everybody we can. And I think leaders are gatherers. And I've come to know that my responsibility as leader is I'm not gathering them to me. It has nothing to do with me. And that's made it even sweeter to go through the grit aspect of now let's go make sure that everybody is accounted for and present. And that changes the meaning of life. And it sure gives you purpose. And it's given me and my wife purpose for sure.